Been wanting to talk to this young lady for some time. She has a great story, a very convicting, encouraging story as well, but I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to go ahead and introduce my guest. It is Maria Morgan. So, Maria, tell our viewers and our listeners here on Saturday Sit Down who you are, what you're about, what you do, and why.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for having me today. It is a privilege. I am a daughter of the King, first of all, wife to an amazing husband, Steve, mom to an adult daughter, Riley, and also to her husband, my son in law, Josh. In addition to those things, it is a privilege to be a writer and a speaker. So I do write. I have a 3-book children's series that's titled Louie the Lawnmower. And Louie, I get the privilege of being a kid again when I write about Louie, and he teaches a lot of character qualities, biblical character qualities. So that's a lot of fun. I also have a devotional for women that is a 10-week series on the fruit of the Spirit. So that is what I do. I also, with writing and speaking, I love to share God's word with my audience. And I know that his word is powerful and that it is life changing. So, as far as what I'm about, I would say that has pivoted a little bit from a pretty general message or a lot of life lessons and things that I've learned along the way to a specific message more about anxiety and depression. And that has been a result of a 2.5-year personal battle with anxiety and depression and suicidal thinking. Since that time, when the Lord healed me, he really gave me a passion to come alongside other Christian women who struggle with anxiety or depression, even suicidal thinking, and really to help them overcome that negative thinking or that negative thought pattern so that they can also experience freedom and just fullness in who God created them to be. So that's kind of a little bit about me, what I do, why I do it, and what I'm about.
That's awesome, Maria. That was very well worded, very well put. I appreciate that at a time. So thank you, Maria, for being a guest. Thank you for being so transparent. But you have a lot to offer our viewers and our listeners, a lot of life experience, your own personal testimony, your expertise in writing and Louis the Lawnmower children's series. I remember when you first were starting that.
Yeah. So my formal education is in corporate wellness. So it's a degree in fitness that can either go toward the hospital side or it can go toward the business side. Because of the situation that I was in my home life, my dad had chronic illness. So I really wanted to get on the preventative side of things, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So I wanted to address people where they were prior to having disease. So I did that, and I had a double minor in nutrition and in business. So that is what I was pursuing at the time. And it's been very interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, I'm sure, just in the aspect of our person being body, mind, and spirit.
Mhm.
So all three of those things come into play with what happens to us. It's not all one or the other. It's a combination of those things. So it's been really neat to see how God has used that.
Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing your education. Now I'm going to go back and forth a little bit. I want to talk
Okay,
about the books before we move along with the other discussions here.
great.
Now, there's been several. Can you list out your books?
I can. And actually, I pulled a copy of each one of them just to make it easy. So this
Perfect.
this is the first in the series, the Louis the Lawnmower series, and it's called Louis's Big Day. And Louis in this book is learning about his purpose. So it's the moral of the story, if you will, is just that God created each one of us with a purpose. So the other interesting thing in this book is that he discovers the value of friendship along the way. So that's this. The interesting, another just unique thing about the book is that I have a Louis lesson corner. in the back of each of the books. So whoever's reading the story to their child or their grandchild or whoever, they can reinforce the main lesson of the book going
Wow.
through Louis' lesson corner. So
Awesome.
that's Louis' big day. Then we had to have a seasonal book. So of course, being from the north, kind of where you are there,
Hmm.
I had to have Louis in the leaf pile. So this is pride on a kid's level. So it talks about Louis wanting to be a superhero, and he tries to do everything himself. And I'm not going to give you any spoiler information here. You'll have to grab a copy of the book and find out how that turns out for him. So
Fantastic.
same thing in this one. There's also a Louis lesson corner in the back. And the third one, this one might be most appropriate for today. And it is Louis to the rescue, the big dig. And this one is about our words and how important it is that we're speaking words of encouragement to those in our lives, especially kids these days where we hear a lot about bullying and things like that. So
Sure.
this is encouraging kids to, you know, make sure their words are encouraging, building others up rather than tearing them down. So those
Fantastic.
are the children's series. And then this is the Bible study for women. This is a 10-week study on the fruit of the Spirit. And this has 5 days of homework per week. And just it's designed to be done either by yourself or you can also do it in a group. There's a group questions at the end of each chapter that you can go through. And I've also taught through this online. And I've got to go back through my videos on YouTube and make those available so people can use those in conjunction with the study.
Awesome. Outstanding. Let's say our viewers and our listeners are intrigued by these books, which obviously
Yes.
I am, and we want to get a copy. Where would we go to possibly purchase them?
Yes, so you can get all of the copies on Amazon, and that would be the easiest place to get them. They're also available on Barnes and Noble.
Let's move into more of the sensitive topic as well. You briefly gave a little bit of a revealing testimony of the challenges with anxiety, depression. You
Yeah.
do have education in nutrition and physical wellness. Can you kind of outline, what occurred, how you persevered, and now how your mission and purpose statement is a little different to help people living with, recovering, or suffering from anxiety and depression?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So, what triggered me was actually having my mother-in-law here. So, she was suffering from dementia, and my husband and I decided that we knew that the time was short before she would be going into a nursing facility, Alzheimer's type facility. So we opted to take her into our home for a 3-month time period. We were so thankful to be able to have her here. It was a really wonderful experience that I wouldn't trade for anything. But what happened to me is I saw some things that she was doing that were not safe. And my husband would try and prevent her from doing things that would harm her physically. And she would be very agitated and she would yell at him. And
Mm,
of course, he's trying to explain to her that he's trying to keep her safe, this, that, and the other thing, but they ended up really butting heads. And conflict for me, I didn't realize it at the time, but it shut me down. I could not handle conflict. So I would go upstairs, I would do something else just to remove myself from the situation. The Lord gave Steve, my husband, just wisdom about the reason why I was shutting down when conflict would happen. So we had to trace this all the way back to childhood trauma. And that childhood trauma, in my case, was growing up with an alcoholic dad. And there was abuse that I saw between my brother and my dad and my mom. And I was at the time young and
mhm.
not knowing what to do with that information. as your central nervous system is developing, you begin to develop coping skills. So my coping mechanism was to shut down. I believe that from there, I developed a lack of trust. So seeing behavior, hearing words of, your family, your father is supposed to love you, obviously, provide for you, all of those things. And not that he didn't. I don't want to paint a ugly picture of my father, because he eventually, all of that stuff was resolved. But at the time, it was very difficult to not it was difficult to trust in him fully, because I saw a contradiction between his words and his actions.
Mhm.
So from that point, I had a little bit of a lack of trust. And the message that I received as a child was, do not let anybody else outside of the family know what's going on.
Mm.
So it was difficult. Again, I tried to be the model child. I tried to be exceptionally good at what I did and always have the smiling face. That
Mhm.
was the MO. So that was just my coping mechanism. So moving forward into the anxiety and depression, my husband realized that I was not trusting him. I saw he and his mother
Mm.
having that same type of conflict, argument, disagreement. And little did I know, subconsciously, that took me back to the place of childhood, what I had seen, what I had experienced. And that pattern returned of conflict, shutdown. So we went through that 3-month period. My mother-in-law ended up we took her to another sibling to watch for the next 3 months. And then I thought, oh, okay, it's going to be just a relief. I'm not going to feel that burden of anxiety, not going to feel that depression that had started settling in. But we drove away from their house and it did not lift.
Mm.
And I thought, this is weird. So I thought, well, maybe it's because I had stepped away for that 3-month time period. I had stepped away from all of ministry work. So I thought, well, that's one thing I can get back involved in. And then I thought, I love teaching or facilitating through Bible studies. So I chose a Bible study to do that was called Comparison Girl. And it was by Shannon Popkin, and great, fantastic book about how we as women tend to compare ourselves in all different categories, whether it's as wives, as mothers, as ministry leaders, as,
Mhm.
whatever area. And I was teaching through that book, and every chapter, I was like, I'm in the middle of anxiety now. I'm thinking, I'm doing every single one of those things. Yeah, oh, I'm not worthy to teach this book. So that was the lie that hooked me. And from there, it just went downhill.
So this
And
lasted then Maria, it lasted,
yes,
what'd you say, about 2 years? It was
yeah, a little over 2 years, about 2.5 years.
so
Yes.
going through this, and I know you shared a little bit, what was the pivotal healing attribute? And then how did it call you into a different focus with your ministry?
Yes, excellent question. So what happened after, and I'll just touch on this very briefly, and I would be more than happy to answer any of your viewers or listeners' questions about it at a future point. But there were 2 suicide attempts
Mhm.
in those 2.5 years. And it was from a place of exhaustion and not knowing how to cope. So, yes, the pivotal point was actually having people over from our church. What happened is my husband recorded some of I'm in psychosis by this second year. And after the second suicide attempt, there was a period of psychosis for 8 months.
Mhm.
And I was living in an alternate reality. honestly believed that my husband and everybody was trying to kill me.
Mm,
At this point, I could not reconcile my behavior with that of a believer. So the lie that I believed was there's no way I'm saved. So, but now I'm terrified of dying because I think I'll end up in hell.
mm,
So anyway, Steve recorded all of my irrational thoughts one Friday afternoon, and he said, okay, I'm going to have the pastor and his wife come over. I'm going to have 4 couples from church who had been praying and fasting for us come
mhm.
over. And we're going to call this a day of truth. So basically, they came at alternate times during the day. All of them shared God's word with me, let me speak about what I was worried about or concerned about. And then they spent time praying for me. So
Awesome.
that was a pivotal point for me because up to that point, I had not shared any of this information
Mm,
with anybody other than immediate family. So it was freeing, liberating to be able to tell the truth and to have these people not judge me. They loved me
awesome.
unconditionally. So they didn't laugh at me. They didn't say that's ridiculous. How could you think that? They just loved me. And if you think about my mind being having a door that was shut, it was like that door just cracked open a little bit so that there
Awesome.
was some hope, a little bit of light coming through.
So you would say that your transparency and the non-judgmentalness of other peer Christians that you've known for a very long time, of course, the wisdom of your pastor all sitting there helped open that door, along obviously with the prayer and fasting. So that
Yes.
was the door push open, right?
Yes.
Then how did it go from there? How did you continue to become more and more mentally healthy? And well, you
Yes.
were also unhealthy spiritually and physically. So how did those three pillars get more healthy?
Yes. So I continued down the path of accountability. Huge, huge. Because during that time of psychosis, I was in a pattern of lying because I was trying to cover up bizarre behavior. So just being accountable, Steve broke down those the all of the irrational thoughts into categories. Each of the ladies that had come that day took a few of those categories, and then it was my responsibility to get in touch with them weekly
Mm,
and tell them how I was doing. So that was huge, just having that accountability. The
awesome.
next thing that happened is I had a friend of mine who I had not talked to in a long time, talked to her for a while, shared what I had done, and she said, you know, I have a book that I want to recommend that you read, and it's by a pastor who wrote about suicide and the Christian.
Mm,
And that was my sticking point. Can't reconcile what I did with that of a believer. So that was like a light bulb moment for me. And
fantastic.
got off the phone. I, Googled that book and then went on Amazon and, put suicide and the Christian, and all these books came up. So I
Wow.
ordered some, started reading, and was like, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. Yes, that's exactly how I was. It was like opening me up and just reading the script. So from there, I ended up attending a women's meeting at our church. The gal who's the facilitator had invited me the previous year, and I just had every excuse for why I couldn't go. She invited me again. I went. There was a lady there who had been faithful to write notes of encouragement and text me. Didn't know the extent of what had happened in my story, but she came over and sat down at my table. It was like she shared some of the things she had been going through, and it was that same dark thought pattern. So now we've got the Lord showing me unconditional love through fasting, praying friends, a husband that stuck with me through it all. We've got the book showing, yes, this can happen to a Christian. Now I've got somebody who I know personally struggling in the same area. So I left that meeting and I had that list of irrational thoughts in the car with me. And I said, okay, Lord, I hear you loud and clear. I'm just going to trust you and go back to living how I used to. And it's just been, I mean, he has allowed me to comfort other people, like it says in Corinthians, about comforting others with the comfort that he has given
Mhm.
us to walk through that trial.
With your permission, I'd like to dig deeper into this, maybe have a part 2 or 3 series. But
Absolutely.
before we wrap up here on this particular first time or first episode, how people can support you and your ministries.
I really appreciate that. You know, the biggest area that people can support would be prayer support, and specifically just for me to keep Christ first. That would be definitely one of the things that I would want prayer for. And then also that I would be an accurate reflection of his love and not lose sight of what he's brought me through. It's amazing how much you can forget when you're removed once time goes by, being removed from the situation. But I don't ever want to forget that because it's just such a testimony of his goodness. I think another way that people could help would be praying for open hearts and minds for other women
Mhm.
struggling with anxiety and depression, or suicidal thinking. And then I would love for anybody to connect with me online. So I'll definitely give you all of that contact information. Purchasing books on Amazon, if any of those books are of interest, would be great. I am in the process of writing a book specifically about my journey and some steps, several steps that people can take to overcome and have success in their own lives. So the last thing that people can do to help would be to take a brief survey that would really help me as far as figuring out how best I can serve my audience. So it's a 21 question survey, very brief, and you can find it at, or you can just email me for the link for the survey. And it's morgan.maria.i@gmail.com. If you do elect to fill that out, I would love to be able to send you a just a gift that is called the 7 Days of Praying God's Word Challenge. And hopefully that can be a blessing to you as well.
Fantastic, fantastic. So all they have to do is complete a survey and they
Mhm.
get a free ebook, right?
Correct.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Maria. Listeners, viewers, I hope you can support Maria in one of those ways or any of those ways or all the above, right? And listeners and viewers, I hope you're able to gain something from this particular interview. And Maria, I would like to dig deeper as well. And I'm sure our viewers and listeners would love to hear more. So often it's still kind of stigmatized with mental health, right? Whether it's anxiety,
Yes.
depression, or any of the other mental illnesses. The thing about it is, we are human beings. We live in a broken world, right? And we get unhealthy, and whether that's physically, mentally, or spiritually, and we have to stay on top of that. So, Maria, would you be a guest again so we can dig a little deeper? Would that be
I
okay?
would love that. I would love.
So I'll have a part 2, maybe 3 or 4. Maybe we'll have a few of them, depending on Maria's time. I'm sure she's going to get pretty busy with her endeavors and her ministries and her writing. And viewers and listeners, I would love it for you to subscribe. I get a lot of viewers, a lot of listeners where I'm very grateful, but your subscription would be much appreciated. And most importantly, share these videos out with others. And until then, until we meet again, may you launch each day with purpose, navigate with principles, and explore with passion.